point where the rate of change of the state will become 0. Not only that, it will remain 0 for all future time. Right? That is the definition of a equilibrium point. Okay. Why this is required? That is for all time that is greater than equals to TF, because it may happen, if it is not an equilibrium point, then it may happen that is, suppose if it can be like a local minima. That means suppose there is a point x bar where x dot equals to 0 for t1 to t2, and then after that the rate of change is no longer 0. Then it cannot be an equilibrium point, right? Because that point, something, it is like a ghost equilibrium point. That is, for some time the rate of change will be 0. That means the system will stay at that point. But all of a sudden, maybe because of some disturbance or some other things, that is, it will start moving away from that point. So then it is a ghost equilibrium point. Yes, Miti.
There are some systems where the equilibrium point becomes itself unstable. Then for those cases, how would you define stability?
Now, again, that is the question. Last day, who asked this question? That is, if it is unstable equilibrium, probably you asked, or who? Fayaz. But how? Both of you had the same doubt. How did you arrive at that point? That is unstable equilibrium point.
So for forced.
So actually, that term is written there in the book. So actually, it is in class 12 said that there are two kinds of equilibrium: stable equilibrium and unstable equilibrium.
No, actually, this concept is wrong. And like last day also we had a small discussion, but today that is I must clear it for all of you. We cannot say unstable equilibrium point. Why? Because if you say unstable equilibrium point, immediately this condition will be violated.
That was my question like last time.
But that day that is I explained, right? So you still had doubt.
So sir, you came up with the terminology forced equilibrium.
Yeah, forced equilibrium point.
That is the case. That is when we are talking about this equilibrium point, it is implicitly natural equilibrium points.
Sir,
Whatever doubts you have, first I explain, then you ask. Hassan, just
Sir,
wait. Please, okay.
No, sir, maybe forced equilibrium point, that concept, I think so, because if we integrate our controller with my unstable system, I force my system to go on that particular.
That is fine, but see, that is, I think there the logic or with the sequence